Hey everyone. Thanks for jumping on today's call. I'm going to get started in a minute here. And keep an eye, I'll have a poll that shows up on the side at some point. Just 2 quick questions for you to answer, and then we'll have a Q&A available at the end as well. I think you're going to really like what we got for content today. I'm excited to present it to you. So I will share my screen and we'll dive into it. Give me a shout out if anybody's available, and if you are able to turn on video, it's helpful for me just to kind of see the reactions from people as I'm presenting. If you're not in a position to do that, that's fine. But are you guys able to see my screen? Okay, cool. Well, welcome to the presentation. This presentation is being recorded, so I will be able to distribute a copy of this recording as well as my note summaries from today's meeting. So just sit back, relax, take notes if you want, but we'll be able to send out the summary to you as well. So I'm Mike Sowers. I'll be your presenter for today. Today's topics: how does 721 exchange residential or well, we have uncovered a couple of really juicy strategies here that can amplify your life, whether you're a commercial owner, a residential owner, or you're a channel partner such as a CPA, attorney, property manager, or real estate agent. We really have an opportunity here for everybody to capitalize on this tax strategy using 721 exchanges. So that's what we're going to cover today. A couple of housekeeping items. You know, I'm doing this as a Google Meet, so you can see other members. Just do not message other members or try and contact them unless you have an existing relationship with them. That is really important to me. Please hold your questions for the end. The more interactive you are, the better I can be as a presenter. So, you know, I will rise to the energy that you guys give me. This is not tax or legal advice of any sort. You're encouraged to seek your own independent counsel. And we're going to talk about my fund today as well, but this is not an offer to invest in that fund. If you want the private placement memorandum, if you're interested in that, you can get a copy of that by requesting that by email. And then finally, we're going to talk about some performance for our fund. Just know that those are all for illustration purposes, and you got to get a copy of our offering documents if you want to see exact performance. With that being said, the performance is accurate based on the data that we've pulled. So we have a full team over here at Commercial Investors Group. I'll just give you a little bit of background on myself so you can understand who I am and why I'm qualified to present on this topic. But really my goal is just to transfer my knowledge in this area to help you build more wealth for your business, whether that's your real estate business, your brokerage business, or otherwise. I graduated from the U of M Carlson School of Finance and Entree degree in 2006. I went into full-time real estate brokerage, construction, and house flipping, did a little over 1,000 projects in a 12-year stint there. Ended up selling that company in 2017, had a stack of cash, and got into commercial and started scaling up. Realized I was an idiot for not getting into commercial right out of the gate, and that I wasted 10 years on residential properties. For that reason, I wrote this book, Commercial Real Estate Investing. This is really a playbook for people with 7 steps on how to scale from residential into commercial. If you want to do this strategy for yourself, you can, or you can just leverage all the systems, people, and technology that we've put in place to deploy this system in partnership with us. I've been investing full-time for 20 years. In that 20 years, I've done a lot of cool content things, and I have created over $50 million in profit for our investment group. We have done really well in the game, but apparently I cannot spell the word estate. But the name of our fund is the Alpha Div Real Estate Fund, and our asset management firm is Commercial Investors Group. So that's a little bit about myself. On the call as well is one of my team members, James Smith. He's a graduate from the U of M with me. He's been with the company for 6 years. He handles all of our growth at our company, which is all of our acquisitions, raising capital, and all of those things. So many of you on the call have a relationship with James. He's been a really instrumental part of our growth for our business. So let's just talk about 3 different avatars that you might fall into one of these buckets if you're on the call. This is somebody who owns commercial property. Let's say it's an 80-year-old. He owns 3 commercial assets. They're heavily depreciated. James, can you monitor? Okay, got it. And he's tired of overseeing property management, having to make leasing decisions and negotiations that the leasing agents bring to him, and writing big checks for capital items like roofs going out and upgrades, and tenant improvement allowances when he signs new leases. Also writing the check for tenant improvement commissions or leasing commissions can be quite large checks sometimes. There's a desire to be debt free. We kind of have the age of the baby boomers who really desire to be debt free. I can identify with that certainly, and so this strategy allows you to do that. And maybe the children aren't in real estate, and you know, this idea that you're going to pass the real estate on to the children and they're going to inherit a burden really scares both the parents and the children oftentimes. So what options does Bill have? Bill can either sell his assets now and pay the capital gains and let the government take half his chips off the table, or he can just wait till he dies, the kids get the stepped up basis on the real estate and they sell it off. But this is income property. So if they mess it up and they don't have the skill set to do all the property asset management stuff after, they could really erode the value of a lifetime worth of value growth that the parents have done on these assets. So they can also 1031 into one other property, but that kind of leaves them in the same position. Now they own an asset that they're not as familiar with, and they're almost worse off in some cases than just holding on to the existing assets. So really it's about simplification and not wanting to pay taxes and just having more mind space. This is really kind of a good avatar that explains most of our commercial 721 exchange clients have a lot of these elements. And so if you're in this bucket, this webinar is for you. If you're a referral partner and you have clients that are in this bucket, you know, this should be having alarms go off in your head. So let's talk about the second one. This is for 50-year-old Lisa. She owns 30 residential properties, built significant equity, done really well, but just kind of getting tired. Really wants to simplify, kind of done with the management, tenants and toilets, all the capital costs. Dreams of scaling up to an apartment, but worried about overpaying for one, getting into a new world of apartments. And let's face it, it's tough to find deals that provide really good cash flow in the apartment game with the rates where they are right now. So what options do they have? Very similar to Bill, just hang on to them till you die, sell them off and pay tax, or do nothing. Channel partners we often work with are real estate agents, estate planning attorneys, tax professionals, RIAs, and property managers. And we pay commissions from our side on these transactions, so there's no cost to the seller. A lot of the kind of financial advisors or even like the attorneys and CPAs kind of have this mental block about getting paid for a referral, but there's no cost to your client. And if this is a really good strategy for your client, and by the way, other investors, you know, this can be a really good strategy for you on your personal assets or for referrals to other investors. Most investors that I network with know a lot of other investors. So just spreading the word about this, if you're the one who refers them, we can actually pay you a commission on those deals. If you're a licensed attorney or a licensed real estate broker, we just pay you a typical broker commission. If you are not licensed and you make an introduction, then we will talk about bringing you into the partnership and you actually being a partner on those deals and getting paid that way. Doing what's best for your client may also earn you a commission as long as it's disclosed and paid by us, not your client. You shouldn't feel bad about getting compensated for the value you bring to them and to our fund. So that's my thoughts on that. Agents, I think, have the right mindset, but sometimes the paid professionals have a tough time stomaching getting paid for their service because they're a fiduciary. So here it is. Here's the secret strategy. I'm going to walk you guys through it here. Investors basically take properties. These could be commercial properties or 1 to 4 unit residential properties, and they exchange them into the fund. And in return, they get shares in the fund. Now, essentially, they go from owning 1 or more properties to just owning stock or membership units inside of our fund, which is a limited liability company. After we own the properties inside of the fund, we execute a strategy to maximize the value of those assets and then systematically sell them off and 1031 those positions into other assets. We are not long-term holders of residential property, but we are long-term holders of commercial property. So if it's commercial property putting in, we're probably renovating the building, putting new management in place, improving the accounting and bill back procedures, and trying to drive the occupancy of the building up and trying to increase tenant satisfaction to reduce turnover. That's really our kind of secret sauce to value add strategy. That's how we've created the returns that we have historically for our investors. If it's a residential portfolio, we can still take it. What we do is we take it in, we have a partner who manages those assets, we clean them up, and then we 1031 those assets into larger commercial assets. So there's kind of 2 steps here. The second step is typically only done if we're taking residential properties into the fund. Here's another way of looking at it for those of you that want to see it more in a kind of a legal chart. I got 3 simple steps here for what the org chart looks like, or the entity hierarchy, if you will, as you move through this transaction. So let's just take these one at a time. Let's say there's 3 owners. They own 2 LLCs, and each of those LLCs owns a property. That's the current status of things. They have a discussion with us. We agree on a value. We sign a purchase agreement, and we move to closing. At closing, here's what the new fund structure looks like. All 3 owners own shares in the fund, and now the fund owns the companies, and the companies still own the properties. It's important to note here that the 721 exchange is a stock sale, not an asset sale. That's what makes it different than the 1031 exchange. In a 1031, you're actually buying the real estate. In this case, we're buying the company that owns the real estate. Now, when we negotiate the purchase price to buy that company, we're buying the assets of the company. Well, the assets of the company in most cases are just the real estate. So we're valuing the real estate to value the company, and then we can pay for that company all in cash, and you pay it all in taxes, or we can pay for that company in units in the fund. So there is an option for owners to take some chips off the table. Just like in a 1031, that cash is taxable, but the remaining equity that you roll into the fund would be tax deferred. Step 3 would be what we do after we own the assets, and that's where we may 1031 asset A into property D. It's still owned by that same company though, and we may do a 1031 of property B into property C, along with cash and potentially some other investors, so that that's owned as tenants in common, or basically fractional ownership of that new asset. another way to think of this is if I sold 5 properties that were owned by 5 LLCs and all of those LLCs 1031, I can't form a new partnership to buy a larger commercial asset. We have to take all 5 LLCs and each one would own their proportionate share of title directly on title. So when the seller of that commercial property actually signs the deed that transfers ownership, instead of selling it to, new entity LLC where the 5 LLCs are partners, they're selling the title or transferring the title directly to all 5 owners. That's what tenants in common is. It's a way to take fractional ownership in larger assets and do it using a 1031. So this is the org chart piece. So let's talk about the 7 key benefits to a 721 exchange, and then I'm going to compare and contrast this against a 1031 exchange for you. The first thing is obviously the tax deferral, but probably the largest reason people look at this is they want to buy headspace back, they want to simplify their life, and ultimately they want more time to travel and spend time making meaningful memories with family. That's really for most people what the actual currency is. That's really the driving factor behind all investment decisions, is more freedom to do the things that you're called to do. This allows you to do that because you have a full professional asset management team that can really maximize the value of this asset. And maybe you've done really well with it, but I can assure you our powerhouse as a company is executing the value add strategy. And in most cases, we're able to uncover additional opportunities for value creation in these assets, just because we have a larger team behind us. It's a fast, easy transaction. No commissions paid by the seller; they're paid by the fund. So this is a great way to save some money on that side. Better diversification. Instead of owning your portfolio of assets, you own part of a company that owns your portfolio and many other assets. So you're better diversified. You're not going to have to worry about one large tenant leaving the building or having to pay leasing commissions or things like that, large outbound capital costs. It simplifies your estate planning and really allows you to become debt free. We're going to talk about the 2 ways we can handle debt in a moment, but there is always the option of paying off your existing debt, and we'll take out new debt in our name with us guaranteeing that debt. But you still get allocated your proportionate share of your debt on the K1, which allows this to be a tax deferred exchange. This has actually been a really interesting anomaly. Most investors look at cash on cash returns, which is how much distributable cash are you pulling out of your investments divided by how much cash you put into your investments. But I think I would suggest doing a return on assets calculation, which is how much cash are you getting out of your assets, but dividing that by how much cash you could pull out of your assets if you sold them. Which, if you've done your job, that number should be much higher than the cash you put in, right? Because you've created value. Most of the people, I had a guy who did this for 13 properties. We had another guy just put like $2 million into it. And the reality is oftentimes owners have really, really low return on equity or return on assets. And by rolling that equity into our fund, oftentimes they're seeing much higher dividends and much higher overall yields. So those are the main benefits. This is how it's different than a 1031. We talked about this. It's a stock sale versus an asset sale. We're buying a company, not the real estate. Because we're not buying the real estate, there's not a certificate of real estate value recorded with the county, which happens to be the triggering call from the assessor's office to say, hey, thank you very much for buying that property for $2 million more than we have it assessed at. We'd like to take this opportunity to increase your taxes by 40%. If you've been investing for any amount of time, you know how frustrating that can be. This is our secret sauce for the workaround on that. So even when people aren't 721ing their properties in most cases, we're liking to buy the company that owns the property, even if we're buying it all for cash, for this reason alone. I'm standing in a building here at 9220 Bass Lake Road. in New Hope. And we bought this asset for $8 million. It was assessed at $3.5 million. Our property taxes went up over $100,000 in 1 year. I am really kicking myself for not doing a stock sale on that deal, because the county assessor would have never known that they even sold their interest in the company. And so they wouldn't have had grounds to fight us on the assessed value. But when you do a third party arm's length transaction and that value is recorded at the county, it's very difficult to then hire an attorney to do your annual property tax challenge, because you just bought it for that. So they got you pinned in. There's no replacement timeline. So the whole, like, I got to identify 3 properties or property equaling 200% of the value in 30 days, and then I got to close in 180 days. Even if you're doing reverse exchanges, now you got bridge loans. It's just more complicated. There's a lot of pressure to perform. And I've talked to so many people that are like, yeah, I ended up basically having to buy that property and overpay for it once the seller found out that my other 2 properties I identified fell through, and they knew that I had to buy this property or pay taxes. You basically lost all negotiating strength, and end up overpaying or paying taxes. And neither one of those is a great option. That's about the equivalent of having to choose between our 2 presidential candidates. This solves for true passiveness, which most of the other options, whether you're looking at a 1031 into another asset, rolling into like a DST, which gives you the passive option, but it doesn't give you diversification. That's the problem with DSTs, and it's kind of a one and done. And then you're kind of locked in there. There's no back end game. Like, I'm going to show you how these funds have a great exit strategy that gives you full liquidity. Better diversification and bonus depreciation each year. This is the piece that neither a 1031 or a DST or any of the other options really give you. And the way this works is every time we buy an asset, the tax code right now allows us to write off a huge chunk of that property. And if you own part of a company that owns many properties and acquires many properties each year, even if you're not putting additional cash in, you still get your proportionate share of that bonus depreciation. Essentially what I'm saying is your depreciation every year is going to be much higher inside of our fund than it would be if you just kept owning your current asset or 1031 into another asset or rolled into like a DST. You're going to get way better tax benefits through the fund in most cases. And then we talked about lower transaction costs. This does not require us to hire like a 1031 exchange intermediary. We actually just do the transactions as a tabletop closing. We're just basically buying the company that owns the real estate. It's a very simple transaction. It's like a 2-page purchase agreement. We make it really simple. We've cracked the code on how this works. And so we like to think that we've become an expert in this area. And we're doing a lot of these transactions now. So let's see what this actually looks like, just as kind of an example scenario. This scenario has us paying off the existing loan. But as I mentioned previously, I'll show you the 2 ways to handle the existing debt. So let's say we bought the building for $8 million. We went and got a new loan for $6 million and paid off your existing debt. We paid $400,000 in commissions and closing costs. In this case, this is you paying the commissions. In most cases, we're structuring these deals now where we're paying the commissions on our end. But just work with me here for the example. So the net proceeds is $1.6 million. Let's say you take $500,000 in cash off the table. That portion you'd pay your capital gains and depreciation recapture on. And then you get $1.1 million in cash to the fund. At the time I made this slide, our unit price was $1.07, so you would have got 1,028,037 units issued to you. Our current unit price is $1.13, so there's been some value lift since this slide was created. So here's the 2 ways that we can handle paying off the debt. We can either assume the existing debt. If we're buying like if you're exchanging an apartment in and it has a commercial mortgage-backed security, or a Fannie Mae loan or something where we can actually go through an assumed process. We can assume the debt, get you relieved as a guarantor, and get us replaced as the new guarantor. The second option is we just submit a request to your lender that they bless the sale of the ownership interest in the company. And we've had really good success with number two. In most cases, the result of that is they want some kind of small transaction fee or us to cover their legal fees, or in some cases, they've had us put some money into a money market with them as additional collateral. But if you got a 4.5% loan and the rates today are 8%, or 7.5%, really depending on what we're financing, they're kind of all over the board. We're seeing rates from 6.25% to 8.5%. This is a really good way to kind of maximize the sale price of your property. If you can sell the property with some underlying debt in place, that allows us to pay a premium and still get better return for our investors than if we paid you a lower price but had to get today's financing. Option number three is we simply buy the company and refinance the property on the same day, and that provides cash proceeds to pay off your existing loan. How does the closing actually work? It's very much like a normal real estate transaction. We agree on a purchase price, sign a purchase agreement, and we agree on the referral partner's commission. We perform due diligence as we normally would. That's collecting documents, inspecting the building, doing an appraisal, reviewing title, checking with the city, other things like that. Oftentimes we're kind of reviewing the leases and making sure everything is as it says it is. Then we secure our bank financing. In most cases, we're going to renovate the property and account for leasing commissions and things like that. So we're raising additional equity through our fund by just issuing new subscriptions for cash. And then we have a closing. We close these deals quick. We just did one in 30 days, start to finish. You walk with the units in the fund, or at your option, you can take some cash off the table and take the remainder of equity and units in the fund. So let's talk about our Alpha Div Real Estate Fund. Our goal is to beat the market. Our benchmark is the Blackstone REIT. Publicly traded REITs generally are producing about a 4 to 5% annualized dividend, and they're in the 8 to 11% overall yield range. That's what the market does on the public side. We have a private fund, and our goal is to always deliver an alpha which is beating that market benchmark. And DIV stands for diversification. So doing it in a way where your money is very safe, it's very diversified across a diverse asset class mix and tenant mix. And it also stands for dividends, which is delivering consistent, reliable quarterly dividends. And we do all things real estate. So these are some of the types of assets we have. We have warehouse, office, we have flex buildings, we have apartments, and we'll take, we're rolling out a multi-unit residential property owner strategy where we're looking to take in portfolio chunks of residential properties and acquire 200 to 300 residential units, and then trade those up into larger commercial assets once we aggregate them. So we talked a little bit about this. This is kind of the 7 benefits of real estate, if you will. I'll show you what they look like inside of our fund, so you could kind of compare against what your existing real estate's producing for you. But 5% plus dividends, historically, we've been in the 5 to 7% range. Our target is always, if you put $1 in, my goal is to give you $2 back within 10 years. Our exit timeline was a 10-year timeline with our target exit of 2032, because we're 2 years into the fund right now. Principal pay down. So, we have tens of millions of dollars in debt. You get allocated your proportionate share of that principal pay down every month, even if you're not a guarantor on those loans. So you're getting equity creation every month we pay that debt down. You get your large year 1 write-offs and above average write-offs each year for that depreciation we talked about. particularly that bonus depreciation is really beneficial. Every quarter, you get a really nice asset level financial report as well as a fund level financial and executive summary. You get visibility into what's happening for leasing, property management, financials, and construction. And then you get to join the Cool Kids Club. So you get access to private events, webinars, invitations. Just to give you an example, we offered all of our investors a week-long stay for free at our house in the Keys, just as a benefit of being a member in our fund at no cost to the fund. I just eat that on my end as a courtesy to our investors. We do a lot of cool private events. We're going to start rolling more of these out as well as our fund membership grows. And then every year, you'll get a K1 with your share of the net income. And in most cases, every year we've produced a loss because of those depreciation write-offs. Most people ask, hey, how do I get my money out? Well, really the exit timeline is 2032. So you got to have long-term money if you want to do something like this. Our plans to grow this thing and then 721 our entire portfolio to a publicly traded REIT, and then each member would get to choose if they want all cash, all units in the REIT, or some kind of hybrid. If you need out before that, some kind of family event happens, you have another investment opportunity that you like better, whatever the case may be, you just simply send me an email and you tell me how much you want to offer your units to the other members. It's customary you're going to take a 3 to 10% discount on your units against the current unit price. But the other members will probably scoop those up, or the fund can actually use refinance proceeds or other subscriptions to reacquire your units back from you. So there is a way out if you need to get out. So that covers that. I'm going to launch my poll here. I got 2 questions for you guys. I'm going to send those through now. My first question is, what best describes you? Are you a commercial or residential owner or referral partner? And the second one is, do you have one or more properties or referral currently that we should discuss? If you're able to answer that poll for me, I'd really appreciate that. And while we're doing that, I am going to roll for a Q&A. Please save my credentials in your phone. You can do that by scanning the QR code or just type in my name, phone, and email into your Rolodex. I really want you to have me on speed dial when you come across these opportunities. Like I said, we're not afraid to pay big commissions on our end, and these transactions really are a win-win-win for the referral partner, for the property owner who's transferring the asset in, and for our fund to grow our assets under management. So with that, I will open it up for a Q&A session as well. Does anybody have questions? All right, John Bunkers, please. Let's see. I think you'll have to unmute yourself, John.
There we go. So if the fund or your business is in trouble during troubled times, is there a call to capital to existing investors? Would we ever have to pony up more to keep things going?
Yeah, there's no capital call requirement inside the fund. We have an obligation, if we require additional capital, to issue new subscriptions to new members or existing members. Most of our members are either resubscribing or they're reinvesting their dividends. We have a dividend reinvestment option if you just want your dividends to actually buy new units every time you get a quarterly dividend. So the answer is no. There's never going to be a case where you're required to write a check for anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, great question. Let's see if anybody else is bold and has a question for us. Brian W., you're up. All right, and you're muted. I think everybody was muted.
There we are. How are you?
Hey. Hey, Brian.
Hey, so when the fund would buy, or whoever would buy a property that I would want to sell, is all the funding for that come from the fund, or you just buy it outside that fund and then reselling that property to 1031 into a bigger one and put that back in the fund? Make sense?
Yeah, so if you have a property, is it owned by an LLC?
Yes.
Okay, so does that LLC or that property have debt on it today?
Yes.
So what we would do is we would buy that LLC. We would take the purchase price of the property minus your existing debt, and that's the amount of equity you have that you receive in the fund at closing. The debt itself, we would go get new funding to secure a new loan and pay off your existing loan at closing.
So do you say that the fund?
The fund secures the loan, and then I personally guarantee it as the fund manager, typically.
So the fund takes that debt plus the additional.
No, the debt is actually issued to the LLC we're buying. So whatever, ABC LLC would actually be the borrower.
Okay, I might have a follow-up question on that later.
So let's say that your entity ABC LLC owns a property and has a loan. All we're doing is we're buying your company, and then I'm refinancing the assets of that company with a new lender. So that company is basically taking out a new loan, but instead of you being the guarantor, I'm the guarantor now because I own the property, or I own the company through the fund.
So that does not go to the fund at all. It's basically, it's outside the fund.
Well,
fund with additional debt, you just get the increased equity.
The debt is issued to the LLC as the borrower, but the K1 and the allocations of that debt do roll up to the fund, and then the fund then allocates them up to its members. So the final K1 that's issued to you would include your proportionate share of that debt, as well as all other debt that we have in our fund. So you're actually allocated debt on your K1, and you get your benefit of all the principal paid on that debt, but you're never in any way, shape, or form on the recourse for that debt. We are on our end.
Okay, so when you go to sell that property at 1031, that is then those benefits and debt are within the fund.
Yeah, so the debt, if I sell the asset of that company, there's going to be a due on sale. I'm going to have to refinance that debt at the property level with the new asset that we're buying. So we're not going and securing like a portfolio loan that has a blanket mortgage over multiple properties. We're still doing asset by asset funding, debt funding.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, great questions though. I love it. John, you're back in the ring.
Okay. Does a investor, whether it's through personal funds or an LLC, do they have to be an accredited investor with a certain net worth?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are Reg D registered SEC exemption. 506C is the type of offering that our fund is, which requires us to only accept accredited investors. So you're spot on with that. We have a third-party vendor who does the verification of that accreditation. And there are many ways to qualify as an accredited investor. One of the ways is if you have a net worth of $1 million outside your primary home. Another way is if you make $200,000 a year individually or $300,000 as a married couple. And then the third way that some of our members qualify is if your LLC or company that you're subscribing with or that we're buying has $5 million or more in assets. That's another way you can qualify. If you don't qualify for any of those and you're not an accredited investor, unfortunately, this strategy into our fund would not work. But potentially there's other funds out there that are 506B style funds where you could 721 into those funds.
Okay, so example would be if you have a strip mall that's worth $800,000 in an LLC, could a person switch that LLC into your personal account?
Oh, great question. So if you own some or all of that LLC, that is part of your net worth, whatever your equity in that asset is. So when you submit your personal financial statement, they're going to look at all the underlying real estate equity that you have, which is, you know, what it's worth today at fair market minus what you owe on it. That's going to be part of your net worth.
Okay, so for the personal ceiling of $1 million, you could qualify through that personally. So the fund would be buying that from a person personally instead of the LLC that's not worth $5 million.
The accredited investor qualification is completely separate from how the transaction's structured. So for an LLC to be accredited, all of the owners also have to be accredited. So if you're the only member of that LLC, as long as you meet the personal accreditation qualifications, then that LLC by default is an accredited entity that's eligible to 721 into our fund. But let's say you have two other members, you're accredited, one other person's accredited, but the third person's not. How we handle those situations in most cases is we buy that member out at closing with cash and they get removed from the LLC, which then converts your LLC to an accredited LLC that's eligible for this strategy. We actually just did a transaction like that where the seller actually bought the member out prior to closing, got him into accredited status, and then they contributed all the equity to our fund.
Okay, so if myself and my spouse were both members of the LLC, we would both need to have a net worth of $1 million each, excluding the value of our house.
Not $1 million each, because whatever your balance sheet is, your wife's balance sheet should be the same.
Okay, even though we're both members of the LLC, but okay.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions. Love getting in the weeds on this stuff. I think we got time for one or two more questions. If anybody has anything pressing. If you haven't filled out the poll, that's helpful. There's like a little triangle, square, and circle in the bottom right corner. If you click on that, you should be able to fill out the poll. All right, John, you're up for round 3.
I haven't looked yet at your website, but does it have a gallery of your existing holdings and then maybe an outline of your team members?
Yeah, great question. We're a privately owned company, so we keep a lot of that close to our vest. Once we get into the process, normally we have an intro call. We talk about your goals. We make sure it's a high level fit. Then we analyze your property and make sure we're in alignment on pricing expectations. At which point, you know, we need to validate that you're accredited, and you need to validate that our fund is the right fit for your investment money to go into. Part of that validation is getting you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Then we release all of our property level financials and details, and oftentimes we can, you know, potentially set you up with introduction calls with other investors that are in our fund that have done this, if you want. So that's all part of that validation step. But, you know, we don't give all that information out to people unless we get to that step.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any last minute questions? James, do you have any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think as far as next steps, one, thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate that. And I think as far as next steps go, certainly you've got our information here. What I would suggest is if you either want to talk about your specific situation and properties, you can schedule a call with myself and or Mike. So you can, some of you know me, you can reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn so you can see what we're posting and do all that. I'd say the third thing is if you are a channel partner or if you have someone in mind you want to refer to us, a warm introduction goes a really long way. I would suggest sending us an email and connecting us, and then we can talk about what that means for you and referring individuals to us.
Great. Thanks for the comment, Greg. Thanks for the comments, James. At this point, we'll wrap up the conversation. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar presentation. Hopefully I did my job and transferred some of this knowledge to you guys so that you can go out and create more wealth in your life using these strategies. Thank you.